Morning, so I'm just going to go through an annotation example with you. There's 5 steps. They're exactly the same as they are in the booklet, but I'm just going to explain them in a little bit more detail. So you can see all the questions that you need to answer there under the Observe title. So what is the theme of the work? What can you see in the work? What type of image is it? And what location is the photo shoot in? So most of these questions you're only going to need to answer once on that first image, and then the rest you can just leave this paragraph out of, other than explaining what is in the actual photo, so it'll just be a sentence. So I've written for this photo shoot, I've taken images of natural forms in the environment. All of my photos are landscape images. If your photos have been taken outside, yours will also be landscape images. You could call them urban images if they've got lots of buildings in, or if there's any people in them, you could use that. If it's more focused on a person, it would be a portrait, whether it's inside or outside. If you've looked at natural forms inside your house, then it would be a still life. The theme for my photo shoot is standing out from the crowd. The theme that we are looking at the minute is just based around the actual topic of each photo shoot. So you could say that it's a landscape theme. To take this image, I went out into my local environment to look for objects of beauty. So that whole section you would only need to write once, and then from this part on, you'll repeat for each photo. So I've said this image is of a rose behind a fence in front of leaves and grass. I centered the rose in the middle of my image to draw the attention of the audience. So just explain everything you can see in the image and where the focus is. So depending on where your eyes are drawn, or if there's something you want the audience to look at first, explain where you've placed that. Next, you're going to explain how it links to your theme, the style or techniques that you've used, and how does it link to the latest artist that you've studied. So it should link directly to Ansel Adams because they're landscape photos, but if not, just try to link it in to whoever you've looked at. So I've written the photograph links to my theme of standing out from the crowd because the red rose has a contrasting green background which makes it pop, just making it stand out. But again, your theme is going to be landscape. The reason it would link is literally because you've used part of a landscape to photograph. Okay, really simple. I've written I wanted to experiment with framing in this image to draw attention to the head of the flower. If you look back on the PDF that I sent you before you did your photo shoot, you're trying to look at how to frame an image and how to change a composition so that it looks interesting. So I would maybe comment on the composition of it, so the layout of the image. The photograph links to the work of Billy Kidd because he uses dull backgrounds to enhance how we view the colour of flowers. Again, like I said, yours will link to Ansel Adams, and whichever macro photographer you chose to look at, just explain the similarities that you can see between their work and yours. So now we're looking at the techniques that you've used. That'll be the type of camera you've used, the settings, and how you think they've worked successfully, and the lighting as well. So you'll see I've written I used a Nikon DSLR to take this image. You only need to write that once. You don't need to repeat that line throughout each of your annotations. Just on the first one is fine. But just be honest with what you used. If you used your phone, then just write you used your phone. That's not a problem. And then explain your view. So if someone was looking at you when you took this photo, what would you have looked like? So I've said I took the image parallel to the flower so that the shape was accurate. You might have taken it from a bird's eye view from above, or you might have wanted to angle it so there was a specific background behind the object that you've looked at. That's totally up to you. I've said I use natural light because I'm outside, so that is likely to be the case for all of you, but if you've enhanced it with a torch or anything like that, then just explain why you might have shined it on a specific area. So then to go through the ISO, aperture and shutter speed, you need to look in the literacy booklet at the examples at the front and compare the image that you've taken to the examples you can see. So does the image look grainy when you're looking at ISO? I've said I used an ISO of 100 because it was sunny, so it would have been really bright. So I'd need it to be low so that you could actually see the flower in the photo. Then for the aperture, I wanted the flower to be crisp, so I used a shallow depth of field by setting the aperture to f2.8. So again, that's going to be the lowest end. You can see that because both the background is blurry and the foreground is just focused really clearly on that flower. But look at how blurry yours is and compare it to the options that are there. And I then said I used a fast shutter speed as it was windy and I wanted to capture the details in the flower petals. You don't have to use the numbers if you're not sure on them. So I just wanted to show you an example of that there. I've just said it was fast if I couldn't estimate exactly where I thought it was on that scale, okay? So next you're going to talk about the expression of the image, so the mood, how you want people to feel, how the formal elements affect the image, and how the content creates any symbolism. Really important that this doesn't have to be true. You just have to think about it, how it could be viewed, okay? So I've said, when the audience looks at this image, I want them to feel saddened. I chose to frame a single rose, and this paired with the fence makes it appear trapped and alone. The dull colouring of the green background creates great contrast against the rose, which is where your eyes are drawn. I think the strong lines in the image from the fence and the soft branches section the image, which make it look interesting, okay? So focus on the colours and the actual content of the image. Are the colours calming, exciting? Are they bold? All of those will affect the way you feel about what you're looking at. And then the symbolism linked to any specific imagery there. So is it showing beauty? Because that could affect whether you're feeling happy or sad. Like the fence here has made it really clear for me to say it's a sad image or an uncomfortable image, because you wouldn't naturally see those two things together. You wouldn't expect a flower to be behind a fence. So just consider what you've got in your own image. And this final section you only need to do once, so that'll be at the end of all your photos, just summing up what you plan to do next, what you've learnt, and how you think you could improve any of your photo shoot. So I've just written here that I plan to develop more rose images. If there's anything specific in your photo shoot that you like, say that you'd like to develop that. And although the framing is successful, I believe it would look better if the rose was symmetrically framed by the wire. So having that diamond directly around the rose. You can think about your most successful image, or you could just encompass them all in whatever you've found to be successful. So for example, if you think the aperture looks good in them all, if you've captured the depth of field that you wanted to, you could comment on that. Or it might be about the content, the angle, anything that you think is successful. I've then said I think it may also be interesting to experiment with filling different combinations of shapes in the fence. So you could maybe think about how you could develop any of those pieces further. So if you were to edit them, what do you think would look successful? You don't have to actually do it, it's just an idea. I've just finished that off saying I will use this knowledge in my next photo shoot to guide my composition and content.